I thought we could just have a chatty little conversation about everything I've been working on in the past months. So I set up a little spot for us to just chit chat. I have everything I have made recently. I wanted to do this because a couple of things. At the end of last year, the beginning of this year, I did a couple of videos rating the clothes that I had made over the course of the entire year, and I realized a couple of things. First of all, there were a lot of things that I had never even shared on the internet that I had been making, that had been pieces that I loved, that I'd worn. I didn't want to go through an entire year of having these fabulous pieces and keeping them to myself, which I think is harder to do when your content is geared around creating things, because so often it's a tutorial, how do I make that type of a thing. Since I design and create, that's challenging to do with every item, although I do have something that does have tutorials and patterns coming out that was part of what I made, so I'll get to that in a minute. The other thing was I was watching one of my videos back with a friend of mine, and she was kind of surprised at how few stories I told. I am absolutely someone who loves to tell you the reason behind how I made something, why I made it. There's always thoughts and ideas behind the things that I'm designing, so I love to share those, and I thought I could share those stories with you rather than just keeping them to myself. This is definitely going to be a chatty little video, so if you have some crochet, some knitting, you're just hanging out on a walk, this is going to be a good one. The first thing that I have made this year that I wanted to share was this jacket that I just finished. I sewed on the buttons today. It has these super 80s kind of buttons because it was the only thing I could find at my local store. It's not really a functional piece at all. It's a super cropped jacket thing with fun sleeves and a collar. It does provide a little bit of warmth, but not much. I was really proud of finishing this. I had actually cut out the pattern for this way back when I first completed my wide leg blue trousers that I wear all of the time. I was just finishing up with the fabric. I had some scraps left. I had to cut into, this fabric came in panels. I had to cut into an extra panel. And so I decided on a whim to just kind of cut together a jacket pattern. And now, if you know anything about patterning, you know that you can't really just cut together, like eyeball a jacket pattern, but that's what I had done, especially with the sleeves on this. I think I just taken a guess as to the shape and just kind of cut them out and was like, we'll see what happens to it later. Trousers were one of the first things that I really made that I was super proud of. I created the pattern for those trousers via Upcycling another pair of trousers, if you want to check that out. But so I cut out these pieces, laid them on a shelf, and just completely forgot about them for over a year. And I found them again when I was doing the yellow Dior inspired bar jacket that I had completed this year, and decided to just kind of stitch together and see what would happen, see what this would become. Did the pieces correctly line up at all? And shockingly, they did. I started sewing it when I was working on that jacket, and then the collar piece was an absolute nightmare. It really wasn't working. I set it aside till I had more patience, came back to it recently, decided to finish it, had really wanted these little toggle buttons, so I ended up doing little toggle buttons on my shoulder, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I wanted to share that with you. The next thing that I have a really great story about is this Upcycled skirt. It is made from a couple pairs of Proenza Schooler trousers. Let me slip it on for you really quick and then tell you about it. To talk about this skirt, first we have to talk about one of my favorite collections of all time, Proenza Schooler Fall Winter 2011, where they just had this incredible fabric. The collection kind of kicked off a series of collections that were really textile driven, which I absolutely adored. When I started to find some of these pieces from these collections inexpensively secondhand, I realized that the gorgeous wrapping of the trousers on your legs in that fabric ended up being kind of like the little finger thing where you pull it and it gets tighter. I don't know what they're called. And so they were incredibly uncomfortable to wear. I was just so disappointed because I love trousers. I love a statement trouser. I love the texture of the fabric. As time went on, I had them sitting in my closet and I found another pair in the same size for, I think it was like 40 bucks or something. So I was like, I wonder what I can do with these. I decided I would try to cut together the trousers to make bigger trousers, which seems kind of silly, I know. And then I ended up buying a dress from the same collection that wasn't the Runway piece. It was made of the same fabric, and I thought I would add that in just to try and make sure I had enough fabric and was going to do these wide leg pants. Well, I started cutting them out very early on in my sewing journey, and they had been another project that had been sidelined for later. But then when I was getting ready for Copenhagen in January, I was trying to figure out a great skirt shape to go with this fabulous coat that I had made. And there's an entire series on that if you're interested in that kind of Dior inspired blanket coat situation. One of the things that came out of that, I figured out how to cut a skirt in a way that wasn't unflattering if you actually have like a butt and thighs by pulling it in the back. And when I was trying to think of fun things to wear to Fashion Week, I ended up cutting out a lot of the fabric and then making this almost like wiggle skirt. I absolutely loved how it turned out. And as you can see, so where this used to wrap around and go around your legs and keep twisting, now it just wraps so gorgeously around the bum. And I just absolutely adored that. So that was one of the things that I ended up upcycling from a pair of trousers. I don't think the other pair of trousers actually went into this pair. So I have still another pair that's cut open that might become the wide leg trousers at some point. But this was the second thing that I worked on and just really enjoy having something that's super functional. And I think long skirts are so in and have been for a little while. I was very happy to add something like that into my wardrobe. I absolutely love the textiles. Everything is reused from it, and it's taking something that I had aspired to be able to fit into, which I think is a really dangerous thing to have pieces in your wardrobe that you like aspire to fit into, and instead made something that fits me and makes me feel absolutely fabulous in it. Inevitable question here. Is there anything else from those Parenza collections that I have purchased to upcycle? And yes, I have 2 pairs of trousers from, I think it's a resort collection around the same time. And then I also have, of this fabric, I have several pieces. So I have a lot of the Proenza textiles. I need to be using it more, and hopefully finally doing something with this piece will help me to be motivated to do that in the future. Okay, so first off, don't hang your knits. The next thing that I made, if you have been following me on any social channels, you've probably seen this scrap yarn hoodie that I made at the end of last year. I have a pattern that will be coming out shortly for the scrap yarn hoodie, which is really exciting. I was making my first prototype test, and it ended up being out of too chunky of yarn, so a lot of things didn't go quite right on this. This is a really crop version. It's extra oversized because the yarn is the wrong size. I'll just slip it on here. It's definitely a pattern test fail technically, since a lot of things I tested and went wrong, but it was exactly what I needed. I had originally done the cuffs as knitted cuffs on the original hoodie. Everything on this is done in crochet. I wanted to keep it crochet, so I had done a bunch of ribbed cuff tests, and they were successfully done on here. One of the reasons that this ended up being a cropped edition is I was working on it while I was traveling and was in Copenhagen and really wanted to wear it. So I ended up wearing it without the hood, without, I don't think I even had cuffs either. Finished the edge and decided I would run around wearing it. I first wore it as a shrug and then I wore it as a pullover. I ended up finishing it while watching a German Fasching festival, which is kind of like Mardi Gras, and everyone thought I was in costume since that motley patchwork is very much a thing that people wear during that festival. The hood, you can see in the mirror there, is the wrong shape because I made the neck of this one too small, so that really fabulous hood on the main design did not work as well. So this one was a little bit more of a amalgamation of what I had lying around, just trying to make it work. So it had a hood that would stay up, but I consider this something really fun that I will wear. The official pattern for this will be coming out right after this video, so stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed because there's a whole series on how to make it and how to make it to the right size, how to use the proper yarn and all of that. So if you're interested, make sure and check out. I'll add the link once it's live down here. But this was a really fun one to wear. When you're somebody whose content is dependent on making things, it can be really easy to kind of get down on yourself for when you aren't churning out projects because you want to be able to share new things all of the time, which is great. But I have some stuff that didn't end up getting finished that I thought I would just add in here as well. I have one more finished garment to share, but I wanted to share something that was a work in progress first. Initially, when I went to Fashion Week, I had wanted to get this done in time. So I was trying to finish this, and then I had the idea, and this I guess is another reason why it's cropped, to wear it with a strapless jumpsuit. Well, this is where I stopped on the strapless jumpsuit before I went to Copenhagen. I was using this fabulous tweed and was trying to get that 2000 strapless vibe, and you can see it does something up here. It has these really cool pockets. It's super wide leg, and then I had been playing around with this seaming detail of basically having the exposed seam allowance be a design feature on this one, since this fabric unravels pretty easily, but I actually kind of love the way that looks. It was supposed to be these two things together at Fashion Week, which I think would have looked really fabulous. I just ran out of time, and so I need to finish this. See if I can get to it in time. Oh, and it has boning in here, which is kind of crazy. This is the lining that's not attached yet, but I was just really trying to be very ambitious with this project. But I love the idea of this being wide leg pants, having the little fringe on the pocket. So something I didn't get to complete yet, but I still wanted to share that it was something fun I had been working on. It did inspire what I ended up ultimately wearing this with. I wore it with a jumpsuit. It still wasn't the full execution of that vision that I had, but I think it turned out pretty well. I'm just gonna put this over here. This next thing I wanted to share is this sweater that I knitted. Love to crochet, but I find crochet to be a very like creative process for me. I hardly ever, if ever, use a pattern for crochet. It's something that engages my brain quite a bit when I'm doing it, but sometimes I just want to be mindlessly doing something with my hands. In those instances, I will choose to knit instead. So that's what this started out as. It was kind of following the pattern. I take a lot of creative liberties even with knitting patterns. I'll show you what the pattern was supposed to look like here. I'll have an idea in my head of what I want it to look like. Knowing what that pattern looks like, I used a different yarn on this. I used the same weight of needle, but did go off grid. First of all, the size of the little honeycombs are a little bit bigger. And then also on the shape overall, I wanted it to be a little bit boxier since it ended up being thicker yarn. I had wanted something that I could do fairly mindlessly because my dog was very sick and had been sick for a long time. And I started making this. So I'd started making this while taking care of him, and then ended up finishing it after he had passed away. So very sentimental, very sentimental sweater for me. It's very colorful, bold, and cozy and fuzzy, just like he was. I had some friends of mine dub this the rainbow fish sweater because it reminded them of that book. Not that we like the message from that book necessarily. It's nice to have something beautiful and that's a reminder that I made of that particular time, which is really nice. I think a lot of people turn to like fiber arts when they need something to do in rough times. I first learned how to knit. My very first knitting project that I ever did was while my dog who passed first started radiation 2 years ago. So while we were sitting and waiting for those appointments, I couldn't bring myself to start my desk job. So instead I was knitting while waiting. I had a pretty hard time finishing this sweater because by the time it got to doing the collar, I'd really just gone off the deep end with my own kind of creative interpretation of what I thought that this pattern should be. And what I was supposed to do for the neckline was the same thing as what was on the cuffs here, which would have just been super flimsy. I had been getting very frustrated with how out of proportion the collars that I was doing looked when I was making them. So I think I had made 3 versions of the collar when finally I saw Fall Winter 24 Dries Van Noten show, and I saw these fabulous huge cowls that were on the sweaters, and I was like, that is what I need. So I immediately cast on a completely different size and shape. I did a fisherman rib to get this huge, chunky, fabulous look where you could see both colors. Usually on commercial sweaters, if they're gonna have a cowl that's this big, it's detachable. I have a Proenza Schooler sweater that's like that because it is so massive that you might want to wear it separately. I considered leaving it detached, but I decided to make this fully attached. But it's basically a full small sweater's worth of cowl in here. But this officially then also becomes our first Runway inspired piece for the year because I did pluck that cowl idea off the Runway and put it on here and had it finished within about a week after that show happened. So that felt pretty fun to have something that was so of the moment already in my closet. It's probably going to get a little bit too toasty for this sweater soon since it is alpaca, this white fuzzy stuff. There's one other thing that's still work in progress I can share. So I'm doing my very last prototype of the scrap yarn hoodie using the correct fabric. It's looking very much like an Easter egg. This one has been the hoodie that is getting documented for all the tutorials and everything. So that will be done within the week. The other pieces are put together elsewhere. So that is my first little chatty everything I made recently. Let me know what you think of this format. I enjoy being able to just like sit back, relax. I need to get a comfier chair. But other than that, I enjoy being able to just kind of hang out, chat, and share stories about the pieces that I make, why I make them. Up next, I have a trip actually coming up. A much needed little mini vacation for my husband and I to Spain. And so I'm already in the design ideation process for what I'm going to be making for that trip. If you aren't already subscribed to Rebecca in Europe, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of the fabulous future content. Thanks so much for watching.